The Supreme Court today dismissed the State Bank of India's plea seeking more time to furnish details of electoral bonds. The top court has now ordered the SBI to provide donor details to the Election Commission by tomorrow. But while information about who bought the bonds and which party received how much funds from them will be revealed, details about who donated how much to which party will still not be known. Here's a detailed report.
A big blow to State Bank of India in poll bonds case. Supreme Court on Monday pulled up India's biggest bank for delaying revealing details of electoral bonds despite the earlier SC order. The SC junked SBI's plea seeking time till June 30 and asked it to share data by Tuesday. The poll panel has been asked to upload the data on its website by 5 p.m. on Friday.
SBI is directed to disclose the details by the close of the business hours, 12 March 2024. Full stop. As regards the ECI, we direct that ECI shall compile the information and publish the details in its official website no later than by 15 March, by 5 p.m. on 15 March 2024.
The top court warned that if SBI fails to adhere, it will face contempt proceedings.
Bearing in mind the application which was submitted for extension of time, we place SBI on notice that this court may be inclined to proceed against it for willful disobedience of the judgment if SBI does not comply with the directions of this court as set out in its judgment dated 15 February 2024 by the timelines indicated in this order.
But in a big relief for SBI, which cited humongous amount of data, the top court allowed it to furnish two lists. First list of donors and denominations of poll bonds, and the second list of bonds redeemed by political parties. SBI doesn't have to connect the two lists, which will effectively block linking specific donors to individual parties.
The State Bank of India will not be providing any details on which donor has donated the money to which political party, essentially meaning that there will be no matching between the two sets of data and there will be no data on which political party has received the amount from which particular donor. Keeping this in mind, it comes as a sigh of relief not just for Bharatiya Janata Party, which has been the biggest beneficiary of the electoral bond scheme, but all of the other political parties that might have been shifty about the details of who has been donating the money for their political activities.
While Congress staged protests at an SBI branch in Bengaluru, party MP Rahul Gandhi called poll bonds the biggest scam and Modi's donation business.
It's very important for the people to know who are the purchasers of these electoral bonds, which political parties were the beneficiaries. Please understand there's a crucial difference between the donations received by other parties and the BJP. The BJP is in a position to give favors to those who contributed to it.
Will SC ruling ensure complete transparency in funds used in elections? With Kanu Sharda in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
The Chief Justice of India and the Constitution Bench was in a very stern mood today, ticking off Harish Salve, who was arguing on behalf of the government and the State Bank of India, explaining why this couldn't be done. But the Chief Justice came down very hard on the SBI's argument, saying that what you're saying in open court is different from what you've written in the affidavit and that you actually have these details. So why not just make them available? Anjali Bhardwaj is a well-known social activist. She's been fighting this case and arguing for transparency in electoral bonds for a very long time. Sanju Verma is back with us. So I want to go across to Anjali Bhardwaj first. Now, there is mixed opinion on whether the Supreme Court's decision actually will bring about more transparency or not. Because the counter can be that if you make public who donated how much without revealing to whom, a lot of what was earlier being given in black will once again go back to being given in black to these political parties, that electoral bonds to some extent brought that black money into white. Now it will revert back into black and no one is any the wiser or any the better.
Well, first of all, Rahul, I think let's be very clear about one thing. The Supreme Court in its judgment on the 15th of February asked the SBI to give two pieces of information. One was purchaser details, who purchased the bonds, of what denomination and on which date. And the other, very clearly, was redeemers details, which political party encashed the bonds, what denomination they were and what date. So nothing has changed today. The Supreme Court has very firmly stood by its decision, its judgment of February 15. And I think that there is no question that there will be much greater transparency.
How?
Once there is compliance with the Supreme Court's judgment.
How?
For the simple reason that today, I as a citizen, all the citizens in this country have no idea who has been buying electoral bonds. The regulators in this country, the Election Commission, the RBI, nobody knows who is buying electoral bonds. What is going to happen on the 15th of March, once there is compliance with the Supreme Court's judgment, is that we will all know who donated.
But you won't know who they donated to. Take any corporate group, if they bought 100 rupees of bonds, you don't know who they gave them to.
Yes. So you are absolutely right that they are not linking. The matching was neither ordered on the 15th of February, nor has the court insisted that it be done today. So what will happen really is that there will be a list of all the donors, including all the companies, because let's remember that 94% in value terms of the electoral bonds have been in the denomination of 1 crore rupees, which is indicative of corporate funding. And that's what the court had also said. So we will now know the list of all those who gave these electoral bonds, and there will be a lot of investigative journalism. There will be people who will be examining these lists, and there will be
to see who got what. At least once we know which corporate group Sanju Verma gave how much money, you can see how they've grown or what benefits they got or which projects they got, and then people can form their own judgment. Therefore, Anjali argues it leads to transparency. Also, you know, Harish Salve got a very sorry figure in court today. He got a real pasting from the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court basically said what you've said in the affidavit is different from what you're saying in the court. This whole jalebi that you created about matching, as Anjali points out, the Supreme Court never asked for it. They never said match the bond to which party it went to. The Supreme Court never asked for it. So this is like a jalebi of the government and the SBI's own making.
You know, Rahul, first and foremost, this is a very unpopular opinion, and I'm taking a bit of a risk, but I will have to say this with no offense to the Supreme Court. This entire electoral bond issue, you know, it caught fire in 2018, because in 2018, the same Supreme Court said that electoral bonds are a great way of funding elections in an electoral democracy like India, because you at least know that the money is coming via checks and not via cash, which is what used to happen for the longest time, for 50, 60, 70 odd years. So 70 सालों तक तो पहले, you know, election funding used to happen with cash and black money. Let's not kid ourselves about anything.
When you come to the question I've asked you, the government was never asked to do matching. The SBI was never asked to do matching. They made that jalebi on their own account, and the Supreme Court just quashed what they were saying. And someone like Harish Salve looked really silly and sorry in court today.
There is no jalebi, and there is no, Indori poha that I'm going to discuss on your show. Let's not trivialize. I just have this to say, that if the State Bank of India has now been given an ultimatum, no less, by the apex court, I always say, irrespective of whether you agree with the Supreme Court or not, if the highest court of the land has asked the SBI, the premier public sector bank, to furnish details, that will be done. But I will also add one thing, Rahul Kanwal. I will not allow the opposition to take the moral high ground कि electoral bonds की funding का खुलासा होगा, so then the BJP will be in deep trouble, because let's be very clear, as a percentage of total funds, only 52% of BJP's funding comes from electoral bonds.
S.Y. Qureshi, a couple of points which I want to draw you into. One, how are we better off? You know, if this information is made available in the way that it will be or is supposed to be, people may start going away from electoral bonds because every party knows who's funding how much. Even if they don't reveal it, at least Congress knows that कि मुझे मिला कि नहीं मिला, maybe नहीं मिला. BJP knows अच्छा इसने दिया, हमें तो मिला नहीं, मतलब वहां गया. So they can do their own calculation regardless of whether it comes out in the public or not. Which basically means that a lot of these companies may revert to funding in black. They used to fund elections in black. At least it came into white. Now it will go back into black. How are we better off?
Yeah, quite right. Very well said. Before 2018, 70% of all the donations were in cash, and Election Commission and others were raising serious concerns about it. We are back to that situation now, but at the same time, there have been solutions on mentioned again now and again that instead of corporate funding of political parties, let us set up a national election fund.
No, but that's a different argument, Mr. Qureshi. I'm on facts, not on an idea. If the bonds are now disclosed, any big corporate which is funding boss, यार ये तो पता चल जाएगा किसको कितना दिया, मत दो. इसको black में ही दो. So we are back to black.
Let me come back to that only. You are right. It has been a partial success for ADR and others, because unless we know who is the donor and who is the recipient of that money, it doesn't really help. Now the whole nation will now be trying to connect the dots, who was the donor, so it is not leading us anywhere. And that was the problem with the original judgment itself. The Supreme Court never asked for that information from the SBI, and I don't know why SBI was delaying something which was already on their computer.
No, but also why should it be made public? That's the other point. Let's assume that XYZ person funds some party. You made a promise, sir. It's like, for example, voluntary disclosure income schemes, right? You made a promise when you took that money that you won't disclose my name. Later, you go and disclose how much I gave. That's like going back on a contract. That's like going back on a promise.
Let me tell you, this case has been in the court from the beginning. And all these donors who have donated have big law department. And they know once the case is before the Supreme Court, the result can go either way. For them to now plead innocence, look, we get donated because we were promised secrecy. They should have known that there's the case.
No, but then they'll all go back to black. They'll all go back to funding in black. So how is the election process better off?
No, wait. Rahul, which is why they will... No, I'm answering your question. They will go back to black, which is why I'm saying that there is an alternative route of curbing black money, and we should now look at that.
No, but that's a different, much larger point. We are here and now. There's an election, there's a reality, there's a situation at this moment. Your idea of an electoral fund is not the problem with that is you never know whether it will be just that money or they'll take that money from the public exchequer and get their own money on the side. So that also may not be a solution.
So, no, but I don't know then what you want to know from this case, because whatever I understood, I've already explained to you.
No, I'm trying to understand, and you're not at this moment at least being able to explain to me, how are we better off with this judgment? If we go back to elections being funded in black, how are we better off?
Yeah, we are not better off with this judgment in the sense, unless we know who is the donor, so that we can find the quid pro quo. We are not better off because we are not going to know that.
Okay, let Anjali Bhardwaj try and answer that. S.Y. Qureshi agrees we are not better off with this judgment. Do you agree or disagree, Anjali Bhardwaj?
Look, Rahul, this was something that was debated in the court also. Before electoral bonds came, as citizens, we had no idea what was being donated through cash to political parties. But whatever was coming through the banking channels, we had information. What the electoral bonds did was that while cash continued, because there was, in fact, the Solicitor General said it in those many words, that cash has not stopped. This system has not stopped the flow of cash. But whatever was coming through the banking channel also through electoral bonds went behind a veil. So what the court has today done is that electoral bonds, which made a bad situation worse in terms of transparency, those have been stopped, and retrospectively, we will now know who was donating money.
No, but going forward,
Rahul,
okay, retrospectively you will know, correct. But going forward, ma'am, you're not answering my question. People will not use this route because it cannot now be done. They will go back to donating in black. So how is the Indian election process better off is my question to you.
They were already donating in black.
Ma'am,
Even
but
with the
a part of it was
bonds,
black, a
Rahul,
part of it was
and
formalized. A part of it was
Yes.
in black, a part of it was formalized, because ultimately the money that came in through the banking channels was known. It's a fairly substantive amount. Now, a lot of that will go back into black. So net we could be worse off.
Also, Rahul, your viewers should know that this was something, again, we are not saying, it was discussed in the court, that the government always had a way, and therefore the ruling party always had a way to know who was donating to whom, because all of this was being transacted through the SBI. So donors knew if they were giving to an opposition party through electoral bonds, that
March
that
2018 to July 2023, a total of 13,792 crore rupees were sent using these electoral bonds. My argument is that a large part of this 13,000 crore rupees in the future will go back to the black channels.
Rahul, they could also be just transacted through the banking channel. And what I'm saying is that we as citizens were not even being given information about what is happening through the banking
let
channel.
Sanju Verma respond to that. There is information asymmetry.
And also on your point of whether this should have been done, whether, retrospectively it should have been done. Section 7 of the Electoral Bond Scheme is very clear, that there is anonymity till a competent court orders disclosure. All political parties have legal analysts. They would have told them that if any competent court, and this is the highest court of the land,
Rahul,
if any competent court at any point orders disclosure, they would have to disclose.
Now, so
parties were doing this.
Sanju Verma, coming on the
well.
point about information asymmetry, that because this is a public bank, because it's the chief is appointed by the government, if it wants to know who's giving how much, will know. Opposition mein kisko kitna mila. The opposition doesn't know who's funding the government. So earlier everybody was blind. Now one side has information, the other side doesn't have information. So it's a worse equation than in the past.
Rahul, one thing which your audience needs to know is that what the Supreme Court has told the SBI to reveal, all that this SBI will reveal is the list of donors and the list of recipients. List of recipients ki knowledge to
Ma'am, you're not answering my question about information asymmetry. You almost acting as if you didn't hear or understand my question. You're very smart. You understand what I'm saying.
I'm coming to that. Why are you getting so rattled?
Because आप जवाब ही नहीं दे रहे हो. जब से आए हो आपको जो जवाब देना होता है आप देते हो. मेरे सवाल का जवाब नहीं देते हो.
आप इतने impatient तो पहले कभी नहीं थे. आज आपको हुआ क्या है, राहुल जी?
Okay, why don't you answer my question, ma'am?
I'm answering your question. I don't think there is any information asymmetry, because please understand that under Section 3 of the ECI guidelines pertaining to the Constitution, Article 324, even the government, it cannot summarily ask SBI to provide information ki recipients ki list do or donors ki list do. But abhi every stakeholder will be privy to the same information.
Ma'am, you ask most people who are watching at this time that if somebody powerful in the government asks the SBI chairperson whose tenure and appointment depends on the government ki batao bhai kisko kya mila, will he not give the information? So if the government wants to get the information, it can get the information. Even if the opposition wants to get the information, it cannot get the information.
Rahul, tell me one thing.
Yes.
Tell me one thing. No, please, no, keep quiet, because I heard you you made a very reckless remark. I want to ask you something. You are the executive editor of India Today.
I just got demoted, but that's fine. Go on.
Okay, you're the managing editor. My bad. Whatever. I will promote you. Ye bhi mere haath mein hota. Are you telling me that everything that you say and do on your show, it has to pass muster with Arun Puri? यदि अरुण पुरी कहेंगे कि राहुल कंवल आपका आज का नैरेटिव ऐसे होना चाहिए on CAA, तो आप मानोगे? There is an arm's length. We are all professional people. The government cannot blindly tell SBI, अच्छा भाई आज नरेंद्र मोदी और अमित शाह को इंफॉर्मेशन चाहिए because it is a public sector bank, आप दीजिए इंफॉर्मेशन. What does the Supreme Court tell Harish Salve today? All it says is, let us know the denomination of the bonds, let us know when the bonds were encashed, let us know who were the purchasers of the bonds. You tell me, Rahul, कल यदि सुप्रीम कोर्ट में ये खुलासा होता है that अंबानी, अडानी, अनिल अग्रवाल, वेदांता ग्रुप, रतन टाटा, विप्रो, इन्फोसिस, these were the big donors. I think anonymity is very essential. मान लो कल ये पता पड़े कि मुकेश अंबानी ने कांग्रेस को तो दिया था पर टीएमसी को नहीं दिया. Will Mukesh Ambani not be persona non grata in West Bengal? So sometimes anonymity is essential to
so this
keep
is a very complex debate.
politics.
It has different layers. We tried to unpack some of those complexities. Ultimately, it's for the viewer to decide. Sanju Verma says, do you believe if the SBI chairman is asked by this government to give the details, will he not give the details? I don't want to say anything. I want to leave it to our viewers to decide who they think is right on this. Ultimately, it is for our viewers to decide. Even Sanjuji is smiling, but that's fine. We'll leave it over there. Are we, and as S.Y. Qureshi and Anjali Bharadwaj both said, are we better off? You know, ultimately, if I am making a donation in the promise that this will be kept secret, suddenly you reveal my name. Is that fair to that person? Now, S.Y. Qureshi argued that they have big legal cells and stuff, but at that time, they understood the process to be what it is. So it has different complexities. And let's see how this plays out. Mr. S.Y. Qureshi, Anjali Bharadwaj said something important. There will now be a lot of these activists who will try and map, and even the political party will know. Take any company, I don't want to name someone, but if that company paid 100 crores to X and the opposition says, hame to nahi mila, or if the government says, hame to nahi mila, then they know that it didn't come to them, and then does that particular corporate then get victimized? So there are different layers at which this will play out from here on. For the time being, Mr. Qureshi, Anjali Bharadwaj and Sanju Verma for joining me on the Newstrack. Thank you very much. As I said, life is not black and white. There's no one yes and one no. There's no one right and one wrong. There is complexity. What we try and do on the Newstrack is to try and penetrate the different layers of complexity so you get a more nuanced view of the things the way they are. Otherwise, you've just got unbhakti on the one side and you've got people who are just going after the government on the other, and without really thinking through all the levels at which these issues really operate.